Chapter 14. Rube Bressler. It is a rule a man's own business how he spends his money, but nevertheless, we wish to call attention to the fact that many men do so in a very unwise manner. A very glaring instance of this among baseball players is the recent evil tendency to purchase and maintain automobiles. Put the money away, boys, where it will be safe. You don't need these automobiles. That money will look mighty good later on in life. Think it over, boys. Think it over. Editorial in Baseball Magazine, 1914. How can you explain the way things happen in this world? Some things you just can't account for, that's all. I grew up in Flemington, Pennsylvania, and in 1912 I was a 17-year-old kid swinging a sledgehammer in a railroad shop. Had never pitched a game of professional baseball in my life. 2 years later, I was starting up a pitcher for Connie Mack's world champion Philadelphia A's. One of the greatest aggregations of talent to ever walk out on a baseball field. And the same time, I won 14 games for them, lost only 3, and had a terrific ERA. Less than 2 years after that, I was back in the bushes again. Couldn't win a game to save my life. 21 years old and evidently all washed up. Well, I've heard of people aging quickly, but that was ridiculous. When I was a kid, George M. Cohen used to sing a song that I've never forgotten. It ended with, "Life's a pretty funny proposition after all." It all began because I used to pitch for the Pennsylvania Railroad shop team where I worked for at Renovo, Pennsylvania. One day, Earl Mack, Connie's son, came up with his All-Stars and I beat them. And I guess he told his daddy because the next year I was pitching for Harrisburg in the Tri-State League. That was 1913, and the year after that I went up to the Philadelphia Athletics. The only pitchers I had to compete with when I got up there were Eddie Plank, who's in the Hall of Fame, Chief Bender, who's in the Hall of Fame, Herb Pennock, who's in the Baseball Hall of Fame, Bullet Joe Bush, Colby Jack Combs, and Bob Shockey. Also Weldon Wycock. What a pitching staff. That's what I had to cope with. I guess Connie liked me, though, because he let me stay. I hung around there until the middle of the season, hardly pitching at all, and then one day he started me. No warning at all. We're playing the Boston Red Sox, and Ray Collins was scheduled to pitch against us. He beat us regularly, just tossed his glove on the mound, and we were finished. Connie probably figured why waste a regular starter when Collins was going against us. So he threw me in there, and I won. Connie Mack was a wonderful person, a truly religious man. I mean really religious, not a hypocrite like some are. He really respected his fellow men. If you made a mistake, Connie never brawled you out on the bench or in front of anybody else. He'd just get you alone in a few days later, and then he'd say something like, "Don't you think it would have been better if you made the play this way or that way?" And you knew damn well it would have been better. No question about it. He knew what he was talking about, never raised a voice, never used profanity of any sort. Oh, he might say, "Good grief, look at that." Never anything stronger than that. In my opinion, Connie Mack did more for baseball than any other living human being. And by the example he set, his attitude, the way he handled himself and his players, like you're playing a great game and your heroes are to the children of this country. Live up to it. Conduct yourself accordingly. Over a period of years, others follow, and baseball became respectable. He was a true gentleman in every sense of the word, not many men are. And of course, those 1914 Athletics were one of the greatest baseball teams ever assembled, if not the greatest. $100,000 infield. Stuffy McInnes, Eddie Collins, Jack Barry, Frank Baker. I don't know of any better infielder that ever played together. Wally Shong and Jack Lapp catching, Eddie Murphy, Amos Drunk, and Rube Oldring in the outfield. And you know the pitching staff. 3 future Hall of Famers, that's all. Plus a few more should be there, like Bush and Combs and Shockey. Well, they won 4 pennants in the 5 years and 3 World Series championships. Can't do much better than that, can you? The only World Series they lost was that 1914 one to George Stallings' Miracle Boston Braves of all teams. Weakest of them all. We lost it in 4 straight games, too. Overconfidence was the thing. That did us in more than anything else. We thought it would be a pushing us over. Also, Connie sent Chief Bender and Eddie Plank home to Philadelphia a week before the series to rest up, and they lost at fine edge. Their control was off. You know, baseball is a matter of razor-edge precision. It's not a game of inches like you hear people say. It's a game of hundreds of inches. Anytime you have a bat that only that big around and a small ball traveling at such tremendous rates of speed, an inch is way too large of a margin for error. Bender and Plank, the old war horses. When I got there in 1914, a 19-year-old kid, Bender had been with the A's for 11 years and Plank for 13. Hell, I'd been reading about those guys since I was in the 3rd grade. And how did you think they treated me? Well, I'll tell you, wonderful. Just wonderful. 2 of the finest guys who ever lived. I used to get near them and ask and listen to what they were talking about, and every question I'd ask, they'd paid attention and tell me what they thought. I used to put sticks behind my ears so they'd stand out further. Boy, I wanted to hear what those guys had to say. Today, they tell me the rookies put cotton in their ears. I roomed with Bender the first year, one of the kindest, finest men who ever lived. See, Connie roomed a youngster with a veteran. He didn't room 2 youngsters together where they could cry on each other's shoulders and conversate with each other. Oh, you'll better, dear. Do better, dear, tomorrow. No, sir, he had an old pitcher in there with a young one. You never could tell whether Bender won or lost. One day in Washington, D.C., Walter Johnson beat me 1-0, and as Bender and I went up to the room that evening, I said, "Gee, that sure was a tough one to lose." "Are you talking about today's game?" Bender asked me. "Of course," I said. "Did you hear the boys yelling when we came into the hotel?" "What boys?" "Newspaper boys," he said. "Oh, I guess so." "What were they saying?" "They were saying, 'Washington wins 1-0, I said. "That's right," he said. "It's a matter of a record now. Forget about that game, win the next one." That's all he said. Well, after I beat Ray Collins, I started in a regular rotation, and I said I had a terrific season. ERA was about 1.76 and all, but I pitched so much the second half of the season that I hurt my arm. It never really came back the way it had been. The next year, 1915, I won just 4 games and lost 17. Yeah, that's right. 4-17. Of course, that wasn't too bad. The real battle was between Tom Sheehan and Jack Neighbors the year after that. Neighbor won, and he just 1 game all season and lost 21, while Sheehan also won 1, but he was only able to lose 15. Well, you know what happened if it wasn't just my arm that went bad after losing 1914. Connie, he broke up the whole team. Eddie Plank was sold to the White Sox for $50,000. Jack Barry and Herb Pennock were sold to the Red Sox. Home Run Baker and Bob Shockey to the Yankees. Jack Combs to the Dodgers, and so on. Bender and Plank both jumped over to the Federal League. The whole team was scattered to the 4 wins, and the A's ended last 7 years in a row after that. As for me, after that great 4-17 year in 1915, I found myself in Newark in the International League. On May 15, 1916, I was no world beater there either. And by June, I was pitching for New Haven in the Eastern League. So there I was struggling along in the Eastern League less than 2 years after beating Ray Collins and winning 14 games with the World Series champion Philadelphia Athletics. I forgot who was is my roommate in New Haven, but I'll tell you one thing, it wasn't Chief Bender. Well, there was only one way to go from there, and that's up. After all, I was only 21 years old, although to tell the truth, I wasn't sure whether that was good or bad. Anyway, the next year, I snapped back and won 25 games, won the pennant, and before the 1917 season was over, I was back in the big leagues, this time with the Cincinnati Reds. Eddie Roche, Honey Grow, Ivy Wingo, Larry Kopf, my brother-in-law, Jake Daubert, Greasy Neal, a good team. Christy Mathewson was the manager. Then later it was Pat Moran. And believe it or not, 2 years later, we won the National League pennant and the 1919 World Series. I was playing on a World Series championship once again. Yes, sir. Life's a pretty fun proposition after all. This time, though, I was up there to stay. Until 1932, anyway, when I was 37 years old. It required a bit of doing, however, because in 1920 my arm gave out again. This time for good as far as pitching was concerned. What happened was that I fractured my ankle in 1920, and instead of quitting and never touching a ball in the rest of the season, I tried to pitch a little bit late in September. By favoring my leg, I pitched unnaturally, and that did it. That was the end of my pitching days, so I was up that familiar creek again without a paddle. This time I decided the thing to do was give up the pitching business and take up the hitting business. Why not? Other guys could hit, why not me? Whereupon I became an outfielder and a first baseman. In the outfield, I played alongside Eddie Roush, who's next chapter, by the way. Oh, what a beautiful, graceful outfielder that man was. The more I played next to him, the more I realized his greatness. Well, he's in the Hall of Fame, right? And he got there on his hitting and the fielding both. First thing I did was I go to him and tell him my problem. If I can help you anyway, Rube, he said, I'll be tickled to death. Ha! The understatement of the century. The greatest center fielder in the game saying to me, if I can help you. Terrific. So, he taught me how to play hitters. Here's how to judge line drives, how to yell for the ball, how to shift on different hitters, and even on the same hitter, how to run out after a fly instead of backing up, where to throw in different situations. Taught me, and I listened, and I practiced, and I learned. I know I learned because I still remember the first ball I ever caught as an outfielder. I tried to back up and tripped and caught the darn thing while lying flat on my back. If I hadn't caught it, it would have landed on my nose. Now I know that in the subsequent years, some improvement was clearly evident. At first base, Jack Daubert taught me how to make the play as another wonderful fielder. As good a fielding first baseman as Chase or Sisler. In those days, of course, we didn't have the gloves at first base like they have today. Our gloves were much smaller, so we had to use our hands and our fingers than when we caught the ball. Today, the first baseman doesn't catch the ball. The gloves catches it. The thing just reaches out and wraps itself around the ball and swallows it in one big gulp flap, and the ball disappears. And I made myself into a hitter. I changed myself a whole style of batting, went into a deep crouch. High fastballs inside were my weakness, so I adopted this crouch, leaning way over the plate, and when I straightened up, that ball would be out there, and I would whack it. It wasn't in close anymore, see? Many a time, the ball would shoot in over the inside corner, and I'd drop my bat and fall back, and the umpire would shout, "Ball!" The catcher would grumble and fume. "Geez," he said to the umpire, "can't you see that damn ball got 3 inches of the plate?" And he looked at me and say, "That was a strike, Rube. What do you want? What more do you want?" I never said a word. It was a strike, and I knew it. I could see it, but that was the pitch I didn't like. And the way I crouched, it looked like it was too close to me to be a strike. Well, 19 years in the big leagues and a lifetime .302 batting average. I hit .357 in 1926, highest batting average in the National League, and .351 for the 3-year period, 1924 through 1926. Not bad for a reformed pitcher, huh? Of course, I didn't try to hit the long ball. I held the bat like Cobb and with my hands apart and hit the ball where it was pitched. I tried to control the bat, swing in a short arc, and get fooled. Not get fooled. It was a matter of manipulation, see, not power. You don't have to swing with all your might every time you get up at bat. Well, all your great artists of the old days maneuvered. It was manipulation then. Today it's power. Manipulation and power, two entirely different things. Take Ty Cobb, for instance. He did everything except for steal first base, and I think he did that in the dead of night. He'd be in his glory today, wouldn't he? I think he'd steal first base every night because that's when they play now at night. Cobb could hit the long ball when he wanted to. Of course, that dead ball, we didn't have a baseball to hit in those days. We had a squash. Sounded like a hitting squash. Plunk. Cobb could hit them a distance when he wanted to. But he didn't. He manipulated. Drove infielders crazy, I think. Eddie Collins was the smartest ball player who ever lived, but Cobb was right next to him. Infielders didn't know what the hell he'd do next. And neither did he until the last split second. You couldn't figure out Cobb. It was impossible. Cobb had that terrific fire, that unbelievable drive. He wasn't too well liked, but he didn't care about that. He rimmed alone. They made it pretty tough on him when he came up, but he showed them his determination was fantastic. I never saw anybody like him. It was his base. It was his game. Everything was his. The most feared man in the history of baseball. Then you got Babe Ruth. He was great too, but different. Totally different from Ty Cobb. While Ty Cobb was a little mean and nasty, Babe Ruth was friendly and easygoing. There was only one Babe Ruth. He went on the ball field like he was playing in a cow pasture with cows for an audience. He never knew what fear or nervousness was. He played by instinct, sheer instinct. He wasn't smart. He didn't have any education, but he never made a wrong move on a baseball field. One of the greatest pitchers of all time, and he became a great judge of a fly ball, never threw to the wrong base, and he was playing the outfield, terrific arm, good base runner, could hit the ball twice as far as other human being could. He was like a damn animal. He had that instinct. They knew when it was going to rain, things like that. Nature, that was Ruth. Anyway, I played the outfield, the first base with Cincinnati through 1927, and I went to the Brooklyn Dodgers for 4 years. Talk about pretty fair country hitters. 1929, 1930, I batted about .310. Johnny Frederick hit about .330. Babe Herman, who's also in this book, hit .385. All of us in the same outfield. And even with what we wound up in 6th place in 1929, and I think maybe 4th the next year. No pitching, plenty of hitting, about no pitching. Well, not really no pitching at all, because one of the best was right there all while, named Clarence Arthur Vance, who preferred the name Arthur Charles Vance, but who was nevertheless known to the world at large as Dazzy. Oh, what a witty man he was. What a fun to be with. I roomed with Dazzy Vance for 4 years, all the time I was with the Dodgers, and I loved every minute of it. He was one of the greatest storytellers of all time. You remember the 3 men on third? The 3-time Dodgers wound up on third base. It started out with Babe Herman up at bat with no one out and the bases loaded. Hank DeBerry was on third, Vance on second, and Chick Fuster on first. Babe Herman hit a ball all out to right field, and it was hard to say whether it would be caught or would be hit, or it would hit the wall. Turned out it hit the wall, and Dewberry came home from third easily. Vance held up so long on second, waiting to see if the ball would be caught, that he could only make it halfway to home. So at the last minute, he decided to play it safe and scamper it back to third. Chick Fuster kept on going from first and made it to third. So that as Vance came back to third, Chick Fuster was already there, standing on the base, and Babe Herman just kept on going as fast as he could, without looking up at anything. So as Vance slid back to third and Fuster stood on the base, Babe slid into third from the second base side. It's a wonder Chick Fuster didn't get spiked. Anyway, there was a rather substantial amount of dust and confusion at third base. The third baseman didn't know what to do, so he tagged all three of them, and the umpire hesitated, rather to decide which two of these guys are out and which one is safe. Rather than an unusual situation, doesn't exactly come up every day, and they started arguing about who's what. Well, while all this discussion is going on, Daz is lying there flat on his back and feet on third and head toward home. Then he lifts up his head. "Mr. Umpire, fellow teammates and member of the opposition," he intones, "if you carefully peruse the rules of our national pastime, you will find out that there is one and only one protagonist and rightful occupancy of this hassock, namely yours truly, Arthur C. Vance." And propped his speech, and he was right. The base always belonged to the advance runner, which in this case was him. The umpire finally declared Fuster and Herman out. You might say that the reason I left Cincinnati, went to Brooklyn in the first place, was because Vance was there. If you can't hit him, join him. Every morning I'd wake up and see him there, and how damn well I didn't have to hit against him that day. Vance was by far the roughest guy I ever hit against. Even worse than Walter Johnson. I mean, he was wicked. Oh, he had a curve. It started here and broke right around your knees, and on account of the contour, you couldn't see it. It was like an apple rolling off a crooked table. You could hit him on a Monday. On a clear day on a Monday, the batter never had a chance. He cut the sleeve of his undershirt to the elbow, and on that part of it, he used to lie on to make it white, and the rest he didn't care how dirty it was. Then he'd pitch overhand out of the apartment houses in the background at Ebbets Field, between the bleached sleeve of his undershirt waving and the Monday wash hanging out to dry, the diapers and undies and sheets flapping on the clotheslines. You lost the ball entirely. He threw the balls by me. I never saw them. Of course, there were two... I never even saw, Of course, there are two kinds of pitchers. Power pitchers like Dazzy, Walter Johnson, Lefty Grove, Bob Feller, and manipulators like Eddie Plank, Herb Pennick, Grover Cleveland Alexander, Eppa Rixey. The power pitchers are the toughest all the way through for the simple reason that you're always hitting a terrific stuff. They overpower you. They can make a mistake and get away with it. But the manipulator's old brother, Rixey, got behind a better deliberately, so he could throw him on the change of pace. I roomed with Rixey 6 years with the Reds. I only roomed with the best, Bender, Rixey, Vance. If I couldn't hit, at least I found out why. "How dumb can the hitters in this league get?" Rixey used to say to me. "I've been doing this for 15 years. When they're batting with the count 2 balls and no strikes or 3 and 1, they're always looking for the fastball, and they never get it. They get the change of pace every time. They're always just as surprised to see it as they were the last time." Rixey and I always felt that perhaps Grover Cleveland Alexander was the greatest of them all because of the conditions under which he pitched. 16 shutouts in 1916, pitching in Baker Bowl, where there was practically only a running track between first base and the right field wall. Only a giant could do a thing like that. Somebody said if Alex couldn't drink, he'd probably have won more games. If I didn't see how he could it have been in any better. My God, he won over 33 years in a row. How much better can you get? Maybe drinking helped him. Maybe it helped him relax. And quick, an hour and a half, an hour and 3/4, and the game would be over. Game after game, he'd pitch an hour and a half. No fussing around out there. No stalling. No waste motion, no catchers and infielders always running out to the mound to tell him he's in trouble, just making matters all the worse. Those conferences out there or on the mound really get me. The pitcher knows he's in a jam. And they say to him, they just remind him of it, that's all. Having pitched and played first base both, I know what they do. The catcher and the infielders run over to you and pick up your Rawson bag like they never saw one in their life before. And all they say is, bear down, buddy. You'll get out of this. Just bear down and work hard. You can do it. Then they give you a quick pat on the rear end and run back as far as they can get out of the line of fire. Now, just what do you learn from that? You already have a vague feeling that things weren't going just right. To tell the truth, you know darn well that you were in a heck of a jam. And you've been bearing down and you've been working hard. All it does is make you even more worried than you already were, which was plenty. There are mighty few pitchers who can survive those conferences on the mound. Take it from me. I remember one day I was playing first base for the Reds, and we were ahead by 1 run. We had a young rookie pitching for us that day. Can't recall his name. Last of the 8th inning, he got in a bit of trouble. 2 out, and the men got on second and third. I saw the shortstop and the second baseman start in to give him their usual inspirational message. So I ran over real quick to get it there ahead of him. Listen, I said, after you get this guy out, be sure to take a good look at the blonde behind our dugout. Well, you could see this fellow's face brighten up, relaxing as if to say, what the heck, I can't be in a rough jam if this guy's talking about a blonde. The batter popped up a little foul to the catcher, and we're out of the inning. That's the last of the 8th, and I went over to the water cooler in the dugout, and as I did, I felt a tap on my shoulder as the pitcher. Yeah, she sure is good looking, he says to me. What? Who's good looking? What are you talking about? The blonde, he say. Oh, I said, I'd forgotten all about it. So when I went out to my position in the 9th inning, I took a look, and wouldn't you know it, there was one of the most gorgeous blondes I'd ever seen in my whole life. Well, I guess it's true. Life is pretty funny proposition after all.